Polite way of saying what the fuck is going on.
This is the first in a series of video recordings we want to make dealing with what's happening in the second level schools and in all the schools throughout our country, what happened for the last year, and therefore what will people expect in September when the schools are returning. Now, we have reports, lots of reports coming in of students in particular suffering in this environment, and then actually teaching staff as well, enduring very differing regimes regarding masks and so on. Now, we're happy today, we have a person who's a teacher and in second level who is willing to speak up and share her experience. So, Alice, thank you for being the whistleblower and for agreeing to come on video here with us today. Would you like to explain to us why have you agreed to speak?
Well, I suppose, Dermot, I'm very proud to be a teacher. I love my job. I count myself as a very, very lucky person. But what I've witnessed over the last academic year has broken my heart. I can't believe how drastically the school experience has changed for the worst. It's become very hostile. It's become a controlling environment, and I basically dread walking in the doors every single morning. Given that I suppose I work in the public sector, I am very much expected to toe the line in regards to regulations, legislations imposed upon us. It is expected that you don't ask any questions and you just do as you're told, because that's just how things are at the moment. What else can we do? All the while it's clear that nobody is actually okay with any of it. At an official level, we were warned that failure to adhere to the regulations would be classed as breach of a contract or could lead to the suspension or termination of employment. I suppose this is probably the reason why I'm unable to sit back, speak to anyone openly or publicly, as it would be a threat to the job that I love. I'd just like to highlight a few things that stood out to me.
Very good. We might come back to some of those regulations you're talking about and the conditions and what you were advised of as a teacher a little bit later on. But first, would you like to, I know there's been different phases of this home education or online teaching. Mm-hmm. How did that work out, we'll say, in the first instance and with the second phase of it?
It was an absolute disaster, to be honest.
No saving grace. No, absolute disaster.
Absolute disaster. It can never again happen. I'm not sure if I can actually fault anyone for this, as we weren't prepared in any way. But however, a result of 4 months of school being missed by students had a detrimental effect on the students' development. The second session, which started at Christmas, the measures put into place by the Board of Management ensured this worked as well as possible. However, an acceptable standard of teaching and learning was not possible online. One-to-one attention was effectively eliminated. Long days in front of computers in isolation meant that the concentration, focus and energy were limited to supply. It was easy, I suppose, for students not to pay attention and to do other work activities instead of concentrating on the class. Covering class content was slowed down, and it meant what should have been covered in certain periods wasn't covered at all.
How would you describe, or would you say, this has affected the whole teaching process and the ability to learn of the students?
In school policies, inadvertently caused significant reduction to class activity time. One-way systems meant longer routes between classes, staggered visits to lockers, mass breaks and hydration breaks all took from class time. Windows were opened, doors being opened all day had students wrapped up in jumpers, jackets, scarves, etc. They were half asleep paying attention basically. They were so cosy and wrapped up. They're slouching, the concentration wasn't great. Classroom doors being left open, increased noise from hallways, outside the building, noise from other classrooms making communication very difficult when especially you consider the muffling effect of the mask. Students did not reach an educational milestone due to the broken years and disruption to the classrooms. Leaving certificate and junior certificate exams will need to compensate for an interruption in teaching and learning for at least the last 4 years, as students are now at a disadvantage.
From a personal development point of view, how would you say this has impacted on the children in your care in the schools?
I suppose in the terms of personal development, For the majority of 2020 and 2021, the academic year, there was no extracurricular activities available for students in schools. These are important for the children's development as academics. Students were devastated at the loss of all sports, music, choir, drama, special interest, and no distraction on break from academics. Isolation in school and limited availability to communicate and connect with other kids on a personal level had a seriously negative impact on some kids. The ability to initiate and maintain friendships, relationships with friends, smiles, funny faces were covered and masks were kept. A lot of kids shy. Anxiety and fear led to many students not wanting to or feeling they didn't want to come to school. They were fearful. When in school, it was very difficult for them, and a lot of students ended up reducing their timetable in school officially.
Yeah. On a personal level, this issue of masks, can I ask you, how did it impact you and those again in your care?
To be honest, I found the mask wearing policy very, very difficult. During the school year, I experienced regular migraines, oozing from open sores where the mask touches, irritation under my eyes, maskne, fatigue, trouble sleeping, dizziness, feeling faint, nauseous, the anxiety, your mood would be low, you would be irritable, lack of concentration, and definitely I found that it impairs communication. Quite a few teachers and students had similar complaints. Because of the effects, I suppose, I started to look into the policy. When we were due to return to school for the 2021 academic year, we received a copy from the Department of Education roadmap for the safe reopening of schools. I have 2 quotes which I share from this, and they were released, Dermot, on the 7th of August 2020. Okay. It was not practical for students to wear masks properly for the duration of the school day. Older students should not be requested to wear a face covering. For staff, face coverings should be requested if physical distancing was not possible, if it wasn't practiced appropriately. Wearing a face covering will conceal facial expression and make communication very, very difficult. Yeah. This advice from the Department of Education and the HSE did change to support mask policies within a month or so of schools reopening, but at this point all schools had some form of mask policy for indoors, and there was mounting pressure from the ASTI to impose stricter protections in the regulations, what the Board of Management across the country already had put into practice, and to look over them old policies you couldn't, they were all overwritten. So teachers and students, they needed to be aware that an awful lot of policies put in place by schools over the last year were not introduced by the DES or the HSE. They were invented and agreed upon by each individual school's Board of Management. This is why the rules and policies differ so much from school to school. It's outrageous.
Could you give us some kind of an example in particular that you've come across, I know you've come across, as to how individual boards of management have implemented this policy?
Well, Dermot, one school I know of has decided that students must wear a mask at all times, both indoors and outdoors, even during PE outdoors. That's ridiculous. The only break from masks are 2 to 3 hydration breaks during the day. Outdoors, no drinking indoors, socially distanced and replacing the mask between sups. They have 2 15-minute slots for eating during the day, that's it. For a child that takes the bus, this could be wearing a mask from 8 AM to 5 PM every single day. This was decided upon by the Board of Management because it would allow fewer people to be identified as close contacts should there be a positive test among the students. Not because a health expert decided it, that it was safe or correct to do so. I suppose the policies are not based on science, as no expert was involved in their creation, and do not serve any purpose to protect. It's all about the school's reputation basically in the community, to see who we see to be going the extra mile to reduce the numbers needing to be identified, I suppose, as close contacts in some instances, parents really need to start questioning the schools and to find out who's deciding what rules your child must follow.
You've described like an appalling situation in the schools there, and can I ask you, have the unions involved, or who has done a safety or a risk assessment based on these things?
Well, Dermot, given the negative effect that mask policy was having an effect on myself, my colleagues and my students, then I decided to see if those who made the decision had taken the risks of mask wearing into account. I asked the school, the Educational Training Board, the Department of Education and Skills, the Department of Health, the HSE and the HSCP for their risk assessment into the effects of prolonged mask wearing, and all of them confirmed that no such assessment exists. So I for one am not happy that I am at risk of losing my job should I decide to make a choice to protect my physical and mental health by choosing not to wear a mask in school, when those telling me I must never even checked to see if the benefits outweigh the risks, or even if there were risks before they decided I must.
That is incredible, I have to say, in the age of health and safety, that with so many of our children, especially our children, in schools, wearing these masks, and there's no risk assessment made by anybody. I mean, when we talk about people's health care and trying to take care of them, each other, and working conditions for staff, I must say I'm blown away by that. That is an outrage, and parents, you said it, need to take care of this and address this issue with the local boards of management and with the Department of Education and anywhere they come across. They need to protect their children. This is of paramount importance, I think.
Absolutely.
So I think we're going to continue to encourage teachers and childcare workers and so on to come forward and tell their story. They can do so publicly or however they want to facilitate that. But we need to get the truth explained and put in the open in order to protect our children. Because
Is there a polite way of saying what the fuck is going on?